Welcome to episode number 16 of the Men and Community podcast. On this week's episode, we discuss everything about play, how play can mean different things to different people, why play is considered a basic human right, and how play can free us from consequences to make us a little bit better. Thank you for being part of our community.
And hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Men and Community podcast. I'm Matt. This is Carlo, and this is episode 16. Sweet 16 for our sweet little podcast. Really excited to be back with you today. It feels like, we continue to record in spurts, as I'm sure all of you can resonate with. We are both super busy, and so we try to plan up our content. So we do episode blasts and do a couple of episodes in one sitting. So if you've ever wondered, if you're watching us on YouTube or see our social media posts, why we tend to be wearing the same things, we do in fact have different clothing, or more than 6 shirts. We just film several things at once, which of course doesn't matter to you if you're listening on one of our audio platforms. So however you got to us today, welcome. We're really excited to be sharing this episode with you today. How are you doing, Carlo?
I'm doing good. I'm just impressed by all the words that came out of your mouth in a really quick succession. There was no mix-ups like we had when I first walked in the door today. So it's going to be a good episode.
That's how you know that I'm adequately caffeinated.
Also really good, adequately caffeinated. I am not. So this is going to be a really good episode.
Well, let's get that tongue of yours a little warmed up with some of our questions. I'll go first here. And I feel like we've done this question already, but I'm not certain. So I'm going to bail on it. And I'm pretty sure that one's been done. So we'll go right into the next one. Ooh, this is very interesting. Would it be worse for someone you despise to be your boss or your assistant?
Do they also despise me?
I think that's a separate question. Let's answer it both ways. Would you rather hate your boss or your assistant? And would you rather be hated by a boss or an assistant?
I would rather hate my boss and be hated by my assistant.
Tell me more.
So I can hate my boss, but if he doesn't hate me, there's not a whole bunch, I just dislike that person, but he doesn't do anything actively to make my life bad. Okay? If my assistant hates me, it is arguable that assistant would, do things to make me look bad, but then they also look bad because it's the work coming out of the same spot. And then I guess the hope would be that I also have a good relationship with my boss in that case and can be like, hey, this assistant isn't working out. They're doing things, bad or wrong. So I think that would be my preference.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. I think I would rather be hated by my boss. I think that in terms of how I like to show up as a leader, it would be harder for me to be disliked by somebody in a subordinate position to me. I think to me, it's much more important because, I don't have, there's still some level of control for sure, but I don't have the same level of control, I would imagine, in how I'm perceived by a superior as how I'm perceived by a subordinate. I think I've got more control to affect that.
So your hope would be that you could change their opinion.
Right. So I'm hoping that through my leadership style, I would be able to create an environment where I'm not hated by an associate or subordinate. And so therefore I would, I guess, rather be hated by my boss. I also think too that I would rather, no, I'm going to flip that. I think I would rather hate an assistant because then I, again, in a more position of control, be able to get someone else in that position that's better able to jive with whatever.
And see, that was my logic, is you can't really do anything about your boss and who's in that position, but you have a little bit more control over who you have as an assistant. So I like where you're going with this, but I was more thinking in the, you have no control over how they feel about you, but you do have control over how you feel about them.
Right.
So
fair enough.
Good question.
All right. On to the next.
Would you accept a 15% pay cut to have a regular 3-day weekend?
See, this one's very, very interesting because I know there's a lot of conversation right now. And again,
In the 4-day work week.
Right. For context right now, it's summer of 2023. And a study actually was just published by, I think, Irish researchers that came and did a research study on dozens of North American organizations to see what the viability of 4-day work weeks is. And apparently it was all rosy, great results, and still the concept feels weird to me. So if we think about it this way, in terms of pure mathematics, I have to say yes. 15% is less than 1 day a week. If we assume a 5-day work week, then 20% of your work week would be 1 full day. I have to assume that if I'm looking at this strictly from a number standpoint, that I can go out and whether it's side hustles or whatever, I can
make up
a day's salary, and then my employer's just giving me 5% at that point off the top, right? So from a mathematics standpoint, I have to say yes. However, I kind of emotionally want to lean towards no, just because I feel like for me and the work that I do, having 5 days to accomplish the work that I have gives me rhythm. It allows me momentum to carry through what I need to do. And I like my job.
Sure. And that's going to be a big part of it, is how you feel about your employment. See, I've spent some time in a shift work style environment, working for a major airline, and we had 4 days on with 4 days off. And that just meant that you worked 10 hours and 40 minutes every day of those 4 days. And honestly, it was really, really nice. Like, you went to work, your whole day pretty much was committed to work, but that gave you 4 days of committed to whatever you want. So I do agree with you. You could definitely make up for that 15%. I think I would take it, knowing full well that I'm one of those people that has multiple income sources. It would give me an opportunity to explore maybe more, or to expand some of those other income sources. So yeah, I'm a yes for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I caught on to the little 15-20% thing. I feel like that's what the person writing the card had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So
for sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's dive in. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart,
For sure.
and both personally and professionally. I've alluded to some of the work that I do in this area in really early episodes. Those of you that listen to episode 1, episode 3, it kind of pops up a little bit in both those episodes. But until this point, we haven't spent a lot of time dedicated to it. So I'm really excited to talk about what has been a passion project, both personally and professionally for me for over a decade now. And that is talking about play. And it seems, even today when I say it, it seems so strange to say that, I play for a living. I talk about play for a living. I do what I can to advocate for and support the playful behaviors of people of all ages, and that this is like what I do. I'm literally, in prep for this episode, I'm wearing a play shirt that just comes with a lot of slogans all about the value and the importance of play. Like, this is what I do. And so I'm really excited to talk about play and from the context of thinking about how we play as adults, how you and I choose to participate in playful activities as very busy, ambitious, high-functioning, independent people, and just the benefit and the importance of that. Because I think that, play gets such a bad rap as something that's frivolous and pointless, and we can do it when the job is done, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to dig into that today.
Perfect. And I kind of knew when this is not a new episode idea. This has been in our documents for a little while.
Yeah.
And it felt kind of like the right time to bring it up, because I knew that we could talk about it almost at any time and you would grab a hold of it and have a really great conversation about it. So I guess the way that I would start off this episode would be, what do you define as play?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is one of the reasons that my personality gravitates so much to play. We talked in the past that by nature, I'm a generalist. I like to have a broad understanding of as many things that I can. And to me, that's what play is, right? Play is used routinely as a verb. You play sports. It's used as a noun. I'm going to see a play, right? Like there's different ways and contexts in which we use this word. And so to actually strip it down and understand what this thing is and defining it can be challenging. However, for me, it comes down to 3 attributes. For an activity, for a behavior, for something to be play, it has to check 3 boxes. And so forgive me for those of you who are like, ugh, why are you making play so academic? But I think it's helpful for like itemizing what we're talking about here. So in order for something to be play, it has to be 3 things. It has to be freely chosen, which means that when you and I decide to participate in an activity, it has to be of our own free will. We have to be making the choice to be a part of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some sort of autonomy. There's an element of independence in choosing that activity. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it has to be controlled in some way by the participant. Now, the level of control will vary, right? When I'm playing football or basketball, or you're part of some sort of a formal sport, you have control over the choices that you're going to make on the field within some sort of a framework. There's rules, there's penalties, there's all these sorts of things that may play a role in how you play, but ultimately you're going to have some control, some autonomy over how you participate in that thing. Okay. So that's 2. We've got, it has to be freely chosen. It has to be personally directed or some level of control. The third thing is it has to be intrinsically motivating. Again, at the risk of using too many big words, it has to be fun. It has to be something that we're choosing for its own sake. There may be benefits associated to doing that thing, but we're not necessarily doing it because of those benefits. We're doing it because we enjoy it, because it's fun. It brings us joy, whatever that way you want to think about it is, but it has to be those 3 things. That's really exciting because it means that play can be a whole bunch of things as long as I am choosing to be a part of it. I have some measure of control in how I participate, and I find motivation or fun by doing it.
Honestly, I don't think there's any better way to kind of put the definition of play in an academic way. I think you did it really well. And as you were kind of going through it, I was thinking back to some opportunity I had this weekend. I've got my family has this wonderful little girl in it, and she is so much fun to spend time with, but she's also very, when she wants to play, she wants to play. So I don't know if you've ever spent time with, someone who's 5 or 6 years old that like they're coming into themselves as a person. They know what they like to do for fun. And, in my specific case, being a large human, I often get turned into the horse, the jungle gym, yep, the whatever it is. So in this particular case, I was her robot. And it's always a good time because when she decides she wants to play, we're going to play. So for your first point, something that you get to choose to be a part of, it's not that I didn't want to be the robot. It's that there was other things going on. I was manning the barbecue. I was manning the fire. I was doing this. I was doing that. So to be the robot, I wanted to do it, but it wasn't until I was kind of in it that, and then had that little semblance of control about it that I really started to like, okay, I can be the robot. I'll be a good robot. So, I'm carrying around this little girl on my shoulders and she's giving me orders. And as she would give me orders, I would go, command not recognized, right? If she told me to do something I didn't want to do, or if she didn't use the word please or say robot Carlo, I would go command not recognized, right? So I had a whole bunch of fun doing that. And then your third point of the, it has to be something that has benefit. Well, in that example, that brings you down to your very core of a human being of what play is, right? It's not being attached to a phone. It's not something that you're really learning from, quote unquote, but this simple idea of carrying around this young girl on my shoulders and being a robot and, go for a run 10 steps and jump up 3 times gains no benefit in my life, but it was something that I just found so much simple joy in that, so I think for a lot of people, those 3 concepts of play can be used in a very simple example like I've just given, but can also apply in such in so many bigger, more adult, quote unquote, ways as well, I think.
And so that story that you shared is super, super beautiful. And that's one of my favorite ways to think about play in terms of what it offers us, because so much of our time spent as adults, we think life has to be serious. Yeah. We don't recognize that there's actually really serious value that we get by participating in play. So you think about the experience of this little girl that you got to interact with in this really fun robotic way. And you got to think, just off the top of my head, some of the things that were being experienced. You got to think there's that creativity, right? There's a creativity and the imagination needed to create that sort of a imaginative framework where you're the robot and you're there to accomplish certain tasks. There's the problem-solving element. This young girl is going to have to figure out how to use the prompts and the commands in the right way in order to make the robot do what she wants, right? There's the physical elements. I'm sure that you lifted her up onto your shoulders, but there's going to be that core strength required on her part to keep herself steady as the robot's moving around. So
really pulling on my hair.
Or really pulling hair, sure. And so, either way, you've got, right off the top of my head, 3 really key things, not to mention the communication and getting used to communicating with an adult, albeit in a non-serious environment. And so what we see is that when children participate in playful behaviors, they're learning all these skills depending on the age, usually for the first time. And then as we go to adulthood, it gives us a venue to practice these things in a pretty low consequence environment.
Sure.
Right? You are almost in a way writing like a computer code or writing a framework. And what that's doing as you're interacting with that young girl is it's giving you an idea of how to set parameters to communicate with others. And those are skills that are transferable to other places in your life. And so it's really, really cool to get to kind of test run that, because I think so many people just downplay the importance of it. And certainly, a lot of people in my world downplay the importance of play for adults, so much so that so much of the play industry in the world focuses solely on the value of play for children.
Kids, yeah.
They don't actually acknowledge that play is fundamental to the adult experience. Play is actually a United Nations chartered right. Like, it is a right for children articled in the Conventions of the Rights of the Child. And yet most of the people that rigorously defend that right have no interest in advocating for adults participating in play in any way.
And I think that's super cool, because we don't think about the concept of play being something that is a human right to have. Because there are children in this world that don't have that. So yeah, I've never considered it to be a right, but it very much is. So I'm fully aware that I'm going to open a massive can of worms here. But I really want to hear the parallels between my experience and reasons for / love of play and my experiences with that and yours. So I have 2 questions for you. One, what would be an example of play that you had in your childhood that you value to this day? And what would be an example of play that you have in your adulthood that you value and consider play?
Very, very interesting. Awesome question. So the first question was, what is a form or a type of play that I participated in as a child that I still find value in? And then what I did, what I do now as a grown up. Okay, so as a child, and I've mentioned this in several episodes, and it's funny because my experience as a child in scouting doesn't come up a lot, like in conversation or anything like that. But this is where a lot of that value for me comes from. Through my time in scouting, all the way from age 6 to 17, invaluable outdoor skills like camping, fire making, cooking outdoors, dressing for the weather, all of these things allowed me to today feel like at 30, how old am I? 31? That as a 31-year-old, I can speak great, but other things elude me.
Okay.
That I can very competently and confidently participate in the gambit of outdoor experiences. whether it be hiking, climbing, paddling and other water sports, winter activities, right? Like that foundation that came through experiencing the outdoors, and, quite frankly, freezing my ass off at winter camp outside. All of those things, while I didn't think of it as play at the time, contributed to my ability to then play more and play better as an adult. So that'd be the first one. What would be your childhood one? And then we'll do the adult one.
My childhood one is going to be video games, right? As a kid, of course, growing up, I was, video games kind of started out as something in my life from a pretty young age. My parents bought us a Nintendo, a Super Nintendo, a regular Nintendo Entertainment System. So I started off with
before the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, well, we had an Atari 2600 actually.
Cool.
But we started off mostly with Mario, and I remember that every end of a level, I had to call my mom over because she knew how to get to the top of the flag in Mario at the end of every level.
That's pretty much a boss mom move.
Boss mom move, right? She's that was the extent of her video game knowledge, but that was something that I continued doing through a lot of my childhood and my adolescence and into being a young adult, and still do to this day. And the games that I play have changed, but for me, where video gaming became not only a pastime and a form of play, but also a form of growth, was when video games became multiplayer. Right? So I remember it vividly. I think it was like 2005. Xbox launched Xbox Live. And, I grew up as a console gamer. So for any gamers listening, you'll know that the PC gamers and console gamers is a little bit different as time went by. But when it became online gaming and you now got to interact with other people, in specific, the voice chats, that was where I built communication skills, leadership skills, problem solving skills. So, no matter how you feel about video gaming, it's one of those things that I feel like I gathered so much experience and skill building from, that, there are lots of reasons I still play video games to today. But one of those reasons is because it helps me continue to grow and flex those skills.
Very, very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your adult one then?
So my adult one, I have to say, is dancing. For those of you that maybe this is your first episode, dance is a big part of my life in several respects. Most importantly, before I say this though, as a caveat, I never danced as a kid. I never participated in any formal dance lessons, anything like that. The first time that dance even crossed my radar in any kind of way was 8th grade, when my phys ed teacher is like, hey, we're going to learn Cadillac Ranch now, like the quintessential Calgary dance unit and physical education. Dance played a really key role from that day until today. When I was 13, and that kind of was the first moment I was introduced to dance. And we've talked about this moment. I had just gone through this like physical transformation where I went from being like this fat nerdy kid to like a more athletic, had post growth spurt human being. And all of a sudden, like, there was, people interested in me because I was a good dancer, whether it be like jealousy or people wanting to like dance with me or learn from me or whatever. So even though starting in childhood, this is still something that's very important to me as an adult, because for me, dance allows me an outlet to do several things. It allows me an outlet to move and be active. It gives me an outlet to be able to socialize with others. It allows me a way to practice communicating non-verbally, and how I'm positioning different actions relative to the song that's playing and what message I'm hoping to communicate with the world around me. And it's also provided me a venue to create exciting experiences for the people around me. That sounds super cocky. Let me break that down. I know, because everyone here is just like, what on earth? This guy's like, oh, he's so exciting. People love watching.
You are a really good dancer.
Thank you.
Fun to watch and infuriating.
But the reason I dance is not to go on like, so you think you can dance, World of Dance, whatever, choose your dance show and like do that, because classic dance can be so intimidating for people. I really pride myself in dancing in a way that is welcoming and brings people in and hypes people up and motivates them to participate in dance, which again, traditionally is one of the most intimidating forms of physical activity, right? Because there's this inherent assumption that there's a performance somewhere. And so where I really pride myself in is getting out and being able to dance in a way that, again, as we talked about before, creates a safe space for those people around me. So that's my adult play.
And I think it's very true to who you are, because you know, whether it's going like over the Stampede, lots of time for music, dancing, you know, you're right into it. We've got multiple video clips of you dancing anywhere, whether it be Costa Rica or, you know, it's just you, even the music comes on a little bit in the background and we see you start to go. So it's so true to who you are. My adult form of play is something that on the outside looking in, I don't think many people would really recognize it as play, but
Really curious if I'm going to be able to know where it's going.
well, we talked about it before the episode.
All right.
But it's anything that involves what you know, I've talked about in the past as active brain rest. So the way I would define it is that anything that I can kind of do that doesn't require 100% of my brain, but is still an opportunity for me to learn something new, try and fail at something. You know, usually it involves some sort of project. Like over the weekend here, I built like a planter box, rather large planter box out of old pallet wood. And it wasn't anything that was terribly difficult to do. I wasn't stretching my carpentry skills. But it was, you know, a process of making sure that things were square and cut to the right lengths and all that. So it wasn't 100% of my brain, but it was enough of my brain to keep me engaged, to keep me problem solving, to keep me, you know, having fun learning these different things. And, you know, I've talked about it in past episodes, things like 3D modeling and 3D printing and, you know, video editing, the stuff that I do for this podcast. It's not all stuff that requires 100% of me to do, but it requires me to flex different parts of me I don't always get to do. So in the example of the podcast, it's flexing that creative part of me. Is how can I edit this video a little bit differently? How can I make the audio sound a little bit better? Learning something new in that regard. So when I think about play, for me, it's just doing new or challenging things. I thrive on growing my skill set. And I thrive on not doing the same old, which is why that concept of having a 4-day work week is exciting to me, because I'm really good at what I do and I enjoy what I do. But having an extra day would be an opportunity to gain more knowledge and do more things that I don't have time to do. So while a lot of people may not qualify that as play, I find so much more joy in things like that than I do things like board games. Like board games have a lot of purpose and a lot of fun, and I have friends that is their form of play. They will play board game after board game after board game. They got walls tall of them. They love new ones. But that's not it for me, because once I learn the rules, I learn the rules. And maybe there's some area for growth, an area for getting better at that game. But it's a little bit more of a closed off world. And I like to live in this ever growing, ever kind of expanding opportunity for different things and different ideas to kind of come in. So for me, that's play. Anything that doesn't really require 100% of me, but still gives me an opportunity to learn something new.
And I want to highlight something really, really important that you shared, that I just want to reinforce, underline, bold, highlight, star, circle for everyone who might be listening to this. You said that play allows you a space to challenge yourself. Now, you as a human being thrive in looking for opportunities to challenge yourself, get better, improve. Having said that, the idea of trying new things, stepping outside of your comfort zone for most people is very, very daunting.
Mm-hmm.
What is one of the beautiful things about this concept of play is, as I mentioned earlier, it allows us what we perceive to be a consequence-free environment to do new things. That means that as soon as we paint over something new, scary, different, whether it be carpentry, I don't know what you're going to put in that planter box, but gardening,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever the case may be, even interacting with children, as soon as we say, oh, I'm just playing around, or I'm playing with it to see how it's going to work out, it's almost like permission to call something a trial, or to tinker with something, or to pilot something. Somewhere, somehow, it unlocks this piece of our brain that is more willing to step into this place where we feel less comfortable, because we know that it's inherently less serious.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because there's a lot of these things that when I've made a decision, again, going back to the podcast example, once I've made this decision that the episode has to turn out this certain way, I will kind of lock myself in, and then I wouldn't consider that play anymore. I would consider it more work, right? Where I'm not playing around. I'm not trying to, try this new thing and see how this looks and see how that does. It's no, I've already done that. I played for a little bit already and experimented, and then I figured out the play led to like a vision, and then now that vision, I will work towards that. Right. So you're very right. And I think that now that you've put it that way, it's made me realize just how over the last few years, how many opportunities I've given myself to play without that consequence, and all of the amazing things I've learned because of it.
And we've talked so much in many episodes about the idea of like, just go do the thing.
Yeah.
Right. This has been a theme in many things. Well, again, using this frame or this perspective of play shortens that window from us just like moving from like getting off the couch to actually the work of it. Right. If we take this and we think of it as just like, oh, we're just going to play around and see if we can come up with a podcast, that shortens the awkward, muddy middle gray area between starting with an idea and then getting through the muck to a point where we're actually systemizing the creation of a podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
So you had
No, go ahead.
So I think that we've made our point. I think that hopefully we've gotten to the place now where whoever's listening is on board with this idea that play is important, that it's valuable as an adult. It helps us be comfortable with the unknown, build communication and leadership skills, try new things, connect with others. So what would you suggest or advise somebody who is sitting here and being like, this sounds good, but like, I really don't have the time. Like, how can I introduce that into my world in a way that isn't taking away time in an already busy schedule?
Yeah. And you and I were headed in the same direction, so that, so you're not, we were both going towards this next question. And I think there's a key point to what you just asked, because you're going to have two different kinds of people that are listening to this episode and coming to two different conclusions. One of them is, I like the idea of play, but I don't feel like I have the time for it. And the other one's going to be, I like the idea of play, but I don't really know what that means to me.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to answer the time one. I'm going to let you answer the other one. Okay. The time one, I think, is a good one for me to answer, because if you feel you don't have the time for play, it's because you're filling your life with other things that you deem to be important, right? That you cannot give up the time for those things to slot play in. So to make sure that you actually can, I think those kind of people are going to have to do exactly what you were talking about, and they're going to have to give themselves permission for an unjudgmental, no consequence portion of their day in whatever that they're doing. Right. So if you're busy because you have other projects, if you're busy because you have something going on at work, if you're busy because you have this or other commitments. I would venture to say and venture to argue that every one of those has an opportunity for improvement. And on the path to that improvement, if you take the stance that Matt was talking about and you say, I'm going to give myself this opportunity to make a couple mistakes, that can be your play, right? So you're still going to be working towards all these goals and all of these things that are taking up your time, but you're going to be using play to also help you get better at them. And by doing that, taking a little bit of that pressure off of yourself, I guarantee you're going to find things that are going to allow you to accomplish the ultimate goal or the ultimate thing you're working on. You're going to find things that are going to make that easier for you because you played around with them a little. You didn't stick to, the quote unquote tried and true to make that accomplishment. You goofed around a little. You had a little bit of fun. You got a little bit more creative with it. And you realized, well, I can make a better product if I do this. I can have a little bit more fun while I'm doing it if I do this. So don't be so locked in on your responsibilities that you don't give yourself an opportunity to play on the way to achieving them. That's what I would say.
I really like that. And I also want to acknowledge at the same time that the concept of having time and making time is also a privilege.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before.
It is, for many of you listening, it may be the case that you're rushing from one job to the next job, to childcare, between childcare, supporting your parents, your grandparents. And so we don't want to be in a position here to diminish any of the responsibilities that you do have. But where I really, really agree with what you're saying is that there's ways to switch our mindset from looking at play as another thing that we have to do and changing it to interpreting it as a mindset by which we can do other things. And that's exactly what you were saying. One of the ways that I like to prescribe play to people is, make a list of 3 things that you do every single day. These can be the most mundane things in the world: driving to work, walking the dog, brushing your teeth, whatever those 3 things are. And for a week, I want you to commit to doing one of those 3 things in a different way every week. This could be brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. This could be driving a different route to work. Maybe you're going to take the dog for a walk in a completely different place that you've never explored before, right? And you're going maybe off trail or off sidewalk, depending on what sorts of natural infrastructures in your community. And this simple art of doing the things you were going to do anyways, but adopting a playful mindset with it, what you're going to find is 2 things. First, you're going to notice that all of a sudden you're much more present, right? So many of these mundane tasks we do every day, we do on autopilot, right? How often do you get home and you're like, oh, I don't remember how I got here, right? Because you just turn your brain completely off as you're commuting back home. So it makes you more present and aware of that time that you're spending, the things that you're doing. But also, if you start thinking about these mundane things and how I'm going to brush my teeth while standing on one leg, looking sideways into the mirror, that's going to be the attitude and the mindset that you approach everything in your day-to-day. Meaning that when something weird and challenging happens at work, you're naturally in your brain going to be thinking about, what if I did this on one foot with my head cocked to the side? And you're going to start seeing things differently and being able to see problems and solutions that you might not have otherwise thought of when you're just kind of in this rut, I guess, in terms of how you approach everyday routines and everyday life. So that's kind of the main thing that I would say there. In terms of the way that I would work to answer your second question is, I like this idea, but I don't know how or what types of play to introduce. I mean, that first one is really thinking about it as a mindset. Asking yourself questions like, what if I was to do this way? Or what if that? And just offering yourself the chance to do these hypothetical exercises. We've talked about this one before, but I love it too. When you're driving down the street and you see someone driving horrendously, we automatically jump to the worst conclusions, but write a different story that doesn't involve that person being a dick, right? and think to yourself and write that fairy tale or that story in your mind of why that person was driving so erratically. And even that is just a small behavior that'll open yourself up to thinking more creatively and putting yourself in that playful mindset.
Yeah, the playful mindset, as you're saying it, in my mind, is a lot about just giving yourself permission to be goofy.
Yeah.
Giving yourself permission to be less serious about some things. So, if you find yourself